Many women will join a family and then be consumed into the family business. Others, knowing where they want their career path to go, will not allow themselves to be distracted or detracted from it. But what happens if you do have a career plan going and then you get married and it seems like there might be something else in the offing? How do you turn what might be a sacrifice into a success? Today I'm speaking with the proprietor of WillArt and of Conferencing in a Box, Patricia OKELLO. So first, welcome.
Thank you.
And you, were completely thrown off course because after you got married, you moved from the town where you were working, the job that you were at, to go and support your husband elsewhere. Did I get it right?
That sounds good. I like the word support.
Yes. Was it support? Was it like,
I ended up
babe, we
supporting
need
him.
to go?
So yes, actually, that is actually true. I was working in a media house, and I knew that my entire career and my life will really be around media. And as a graphic designer, I was doing a lot of online graphics for television. And I knew that would be my life. I'd probably go into agency life, maybe become a producer, maybe go into film. But I really did have a plan. But I met my husband, of course, as these plans were being had. And in his wisdom, because he lived in Mombasa and I was in Nairobi, and we were getting married, and of course that conversation needed to have been had, which we didn't have it. And I went back, when we got married, I just went back to doing what to my goals and what I wanted to do. But it was obviously not a tenable situation. We were both committed to living together and to making our marriage work and eventually having a family. So when the conversation started around, look, maybe you can move to Mombasa and join me, I needed to think about it. I needed to think through it. And I did hand in my resignation with tears because I thought this was my dream job to the life that I had wanted and the plans that I had. And I moved to Mombasa to join him. Fortunately, we had already registered the business, so he's a 50% shareholder in WillArt Productions. And I went in as a graphic designer, did a lot of freelance work, and slowly the business began to grow. So yes.
So I want to go back to that, day one of, you've now resigned, you've gotten on the train, the plane, or whatever it was, and you've arrived in Mombasa. Did you know what WillArt Productions was going to do?
No.
You just started a company.
I knew,
you just registered a company.
I just registered the business. Okay, because when I joined media, the media house that I was at, I already had a lot of customers that I would do work on a private capacity with. And when I joined the media house, they continued, to ask me to do work for them. So it was kind of like a continuum. Of course, when you're doing work with corporates, I had to now register an actual business, which I did in September of the same year that I resigned. And they gave me quite a bit of work towards the end of the year. And so, yeah, it was just like, I would say an organic or an amorphous kind of growth. But I didn't have a business plan for WillArt Productions, no. Mm-hmm. I just knew that I was offering my service as a graphic designer, and I needed a vehicle to do that, yeah.
Did you consider yourself a business person then?
No, I considered myself a graphic designer.
Do you consider yourself a business person now?
Yes, right now I do. I consider myself actually a female entrepreneur. Those are the words that I use when I describe myself.
What shifted?
I think the big thing I think for business is when you actually hire somebody. I think for me that was the big thing. That was when I began to see myself not just as Patricia, but as WillArt Productions as an institution, and that is responsible to ensure that I'm paying the salaries on time. Mm-hmm. So that was the first shift, I would say, in terms of taking the business seriously and really thinking through what I had to offer. And then, of course, as the business grows and you start buying equipment and taking up larger premises, then your mind shifts. You start shifting from just being a designer, which is not a bad thing, but now being a business owner and an entrepreneur and a leader in the organization, yeah.
In the intervening period between you being a graphic designer to you becoming a female entrepreneur, Did you ever want to go back? Did you ever regret?
No.
Truth.
No, I have had absolute no regrets. I think if you believe in kismet, or this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm certain about that. Had I been shown that this is what I was supposed to be doing at that time, probably I wouldn't have believed it. But I have never looked back. I've never wished for employment. Entrepreneurship has given me a lot of freedom. There's a lot of stress that comes with it, but a lot of freedom. And especially with raising a young family as a woman, it did give me quite a bit of freedom in terms of I don't have to just up and leave being posted somewhere, etc. Although you have sleepless nights as an entrepreneur, yes, but it's sleepless nights in my house,
yes,
and with my family, and that for me was a big thing, yeah.
And about building your own business.
Exactly,
as well.
exactly, yeah.
So in the period that obviously WillArt has grown to be really large and well known, particularly in Kenya and in the region. Why didn't you just join the family business though? Because what many people who are watching might not know is that there is another institution that sort of came with your husband. Yeah. He's second generation.
Yeah,
second
that's
generation?
correct. He's second generation.
Yes.
So the first thing is when I married my husband, he wasn't working in the family business. He only joined the family business maybe 2 years into our marriage, actually about 3 years, and his father had had a heart attack, and him being the eldest in the family, naturally the conversation when his dad recovered was, "Hey son, I think you need to be coming back to Nairobi and join us in the family business." So it was a tough decision. We were young and probably easier to uproot. I only had one child at the time, and so we just packed our things and came into to Nairobi. And he joined the family business. Of course, a lot of romantic notions that he had when he joined were quickly dispelled. And the conversation began, I think we as our generation need to just, have our own business. And I think that's what you should focus on. And as I became more confident as a business leader, of course, the temptation was to, bring my skills into the family business. But we had already taken a decision that we would not do that. That he would join the family business and work there and in his role with his parents, and I would and he would support me in running WillArt. So
it's actually very interesting that you had made a deliberate decision, because I'd imagine even at 3 years into your marriage and 3 years into a very young business as well, you can still fold. And it sort of makes sense in the area in which your husband and his family is, which is education, that there is a lot of work naturally that would come your way. What informed that decision?
I think, as I said, a lot of myths that we had of him joining the family business were dispelled, especially when it came to decision making. There are very many complex ways in which decisions are made in a family business. And he's a professional, and he just felt that he had to probably compromise on a lot of things, and he just felt that it was the right thing at the time. I had no desire. I had no opinion, actually, to be honest, yeah. I was just like, okay, family business, okay, well, it's fine. But as the years have gone by, I've really, really appreciated his wisdom and probably his vision, because I was able to immerse myself into what I was doing, and he was my business partner, so we could do pretty much what we wanted, to take the business in the direction that we wanted to. We learned a lot from the larger business, which was at the time supporting us. We learned a lot of, how to take decisions, how to structure, who to hire, And so we learned a lot of lessons that we're benefiting. The two businesses that we're running now are benefiting from it. But I would just 100% put that to the wisdom of my husband. It had nothing to do with me, no.
You've given away a lot of credit, but I think that there is something to be said about the way in which you have run WillArt and have established it in this market. I mean, you are known in your own right, not for where you have come from in a sense,
yes.
or that you're married to. In fact, very many people won't necessarily know that about you.
That's true.
And know that that there is this other facet of your family. How do you balance what is a fairly large business now? How many employees do you have now?
I have. I've scaled it down. So we had when we were at our largest, we had about 22. We're now at about 19 in the combined businesses, because they're very complementary.
Yes.
And I've had some of my staff have been with me for at least 11 to 12 years, and some from when we started, really. So we're a real family. I really feel the business really, I would say, reflects my values as a person, and in what I believe in how small businesses should be run. as a family, and I love it. I really love that about running the business. With regards to the larger business, there have been pros and cons, I'll be honest, yeah. And the temptation sometimes is, especially when you're dealing with large financial institutions who look at small businesses as very, flighty, and, there's the temptation is to say, but do you know who, this family is? But we've tried to avoid that as much as possible, and that way the business can stand a lot on its own. Of course, banks being banks, and eventually they will find out through the directors who's who. But far and large, we try not to separate the two businesses completely.
How do you deal with banks who will say to you, or other financial institutions that will say to you, why don't you go back and come back with the husband?
Yeah, oh gosh, it does happen. Fortunately, what we did, and this was probably by default, is because I was a designer and I had this artistic and romantic notions of how I wanted to run my business. I wasn't really involved with the finances. So what I would do is that I would code for the jobs, I would bank the checks, and that was it. And I would then go to my husband and say, I think I need to do an audit, right? And he would deal with the auditors, and so that was the default rules that we had. So invariably, when it went to the bank initially, he would go and speak to the manager and say, I have this little business that my wife, runs. We need a facility, that kind of thing. And then as I became more and more confident, I then was the one who would be front-facing. I would identify the machines I wanted to purchase. I would sit with my RM, who's usually a lady like myself, and it would be really good. I mean, we'd have nice, intimate conversations around what I wanted to do with the business. So I began to get into my own. But I must say, initially, because it was an area that I wasn't familiar with, I was happy for him to be front-facing. Maybe I would only say, I just recently, with my new business conferencing in a box, which is 7 years old, and that they do not know my husband at all. I had to really deal with a lot of, establishing myself as a business person with the bank that I had selected, and many women on the other side telling them that, look, you really need to support fellow women. You can't be so hard on us. I already have a track record. I've run this business for 12 years. I can bring you all my accounts, my audited accounts, to show that I have a name behind me. But I felt that I really needed to work extra hard to just prove that I was not a fly-by-night, an entrepreneur. I mean, I was somebody serious. And unfortunately, that's just how it is. Yeah.
Why do you think that the financial institutions look upon women-led businesses so harshly when chamas and women's circles tend to be offered facilities more readily?
Okay. I think this is my understanding. Financial organizations want a lot of money. They want companies that are turning over a lot of money, or large amounts of money, because probably administratively it's just tedious to deal with the small accounts. Women naturally are very cautious in their business. So even our projections, the way we think, the way we do our business is very safe and very small. So we're not they would need to deal with probably 100 women, while when it comes to our male counterparts, it would just be one business. And I think it's not attractive, I think, for a bank to invest in these 100 women. That's my thinking and my understanding. The women who seem to have benefited from the financial institutions as they are now are women who are thinking of scale, large, and those are few and far between. And I don't think that if Patricia is starting her business in her bedroom, which is where I started my business, and there's this huge business that a woman has led and seems to be doing really well, it's not something that I would be able to relate with, yeah? But if you told me that there's a Renee who has this, she's got 5 employees, and there's another one that had 15 employees, for me as a woman, I can see the progression, and then it becomes attractive for me to go into business and probably eventually begin to borrow money, get the confidence to borrow, to refund. But I feel banks just want the large numbers, not these little, economy of Kadogo, that kind of thing. I don't think it attracts them, yeah.
You've written about this and about your experiences, and in fact, you've interviewed a lot of women in business. Why did you think, first of all, to even write about this? What prompted you?
Okay, the first thing is when I looked back after running my business, it must have been, I think it was almost 15 years. I couldn't believe I had run a business for 15 years. I had managed to pay my rent, pay salaries, pay suppliers. It was, if you knew me, and I knew myself 15 years ago, I couldn't believe that was me. And then I started really in introspection, looking and thinking, what made it happen, you know? And it was having great support, certainly from my husband and from his family who are already entrepreneurs, but also in the businesses that I approached to give me business, there was always a woman on the other side who took a gamble and, you know, said, okay, let me support this girl and see what happens. And as I progressed through, in 2014, I was nominated for an award in the US, and I went and I won the award, and I networked with multimillionaires and even dollar billionaires, and I just saw there's a sisterhood in women doing business together. How can I come and recreate the feeling that I had in me to more women? So initially I had thought that maybe I can do a talk show, you know. Then I realized that's really not me, and I had already begun to embrace the fact that I was introverted and I was not, you know, out there. I was not a sanguine personality, but I could still do something. Those are not hindrances. Those are things that would only make me do things better as Patricia would. And so, of course, there's nowhere better to hide yourself than in a book. So I started, you know, jotting down all the things that I had learned and things that I'd loved to see in a book, things that I'd have loved other women to have shared with me. And once the idea began to take root, I also became very confident and began to ask other women, female entrepreneurs, would you be part of this project, you know, of telling our stories in its real authentic form and not in a glossy magazine that makes it look really out there? And more women accepted, you know.
What do you wish you'd known then that you know now that informed the book?
Wow, what did I wish I had done? I wish I had started it earlier. I would say that, yeah.
You wish you'd started business earlier?
Well, not business, or I mean in terms of interviewing women and speaking to women intentionally about their journey in business. Because we meet as women and we'll talk about our kids and we'll talk about, you know, everything else. But I wish I had been more deliberate, even, you know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, from when I started my journey, to deliberately speak about what I was doing in business. And not, you know, because when I started my business, a lot of the people I had graduated from university with were going to work for large multinationals, and their life seemed so glamorous as compared to me. They're really trying from one paycheck to the other. But now, 15, 18 years later, they come to me and ask me, now I'm done with my career, I'd really like to go into business. And suddenly I become an expert from my journey that I had received. I wish I had not looked at myself, you know, like I wasn't doing much. I wish I had, you know, looked at myself that this is something exciting that I'm doing, and hopefully later I will give it back to other women.
Patricia, what are you glad that you did not know when you started your business, the knowing of which would have made you freeze then, and WillArt would never have come into being?
I think the one thing that I would, oh my gosh, would be that I would have been required to speak in front of people. I would never have done it because I am naturally completely introverted, completely frightened of speaking in front of people, feel like I shall be judged. But the fact that I needed to do it as a business person, and I needed to be a leader, and I needed to show, by example, my clients and my staff that I knew what I was doing, has naturally put me in front of women and in front of cameras. That would be very, very fearful. Yeah.
What do you acknowledge yourself for doing, for being, and for having as a result of having run a successful business for 18 years?
Wow, that's really interesting. I think the big thing for me is that the amount of knowledge that I have in me, yeah, and accepting that I know stuff, you know. And we don't speak about it. I think as women, we naturally don't want to, you know, to oversell ourselves, in quote. But for me, I think that I have knowledge. I think I am an expert in my industry, in my field, as a female entrepreneur, as a woman in business, as a woman in marketing and production, as a salesperson, because we become our own salespeople. And I acknowledge that now. I'm a mother. Yeah, I never forget about the fact that I'm a mother and a wife. And I feel those roles are intertwined, and I have somehow managed to juggle, you know, these roles and still be present for my family and for my husband. And for me, that's a big thing, yeah.
What drives you?
Oh, my passion right now it's my passion for female entrepreneurs, my passion to spread the message of abundance, and that we've got so much to give, and if we give, we're not taking anything away from ourselves. And just being able to change the mind shift that this thing is all about competition and winning, while I feel that it's more about spreading knowledge and encouraging other people to try it out and see how it'll improve your life. You know, before I went into business, I didn't know if somebody gives you 1,000 shillings, that you can make that 1,000 shillings, 10,000 shillings without, putting it in the bank. That you can actually turn it over a lot faster. And that notion is something that I really want people to understand. This thing is not about hoarding and keeping. If you have an idea, share the idea. You'll be taught how to monetize it by your customers. And for me, I'm really passionate about telling people, share. It's all about abundance and an abundance mentality. And that's what's driving me right now.
In fact, conferencing in a box was the result of an act of generosity in a conversation where you were sat with someone in a conference.
Do you know, Conference in a Box is just, for me, a miracle business, because I met Yvonne Finch, who ended up being somebody who would really inspire a lot of women. I mean, she does a lot of work if you Google her name, she does a lot of work for women in business through organizations like Vital Voices. And I was in a situation with my business. I was just like, I feel like WillArt is really not growing. I feel this is really where it's reached, And we started talking more in depth about the business. Just a conversation, and we talked, and she'd ask questions and ask me until I started coming up with the answers myself. Why don't I do this? Why don't I offer the services of the years of me being in business that I have to clients who eventually turned out to be clients who run conferences and events? So that whole story of just being asked the why until there are no more whys to ask became a business idea, which ended up being Conference in a Box. I knew I didn't want to do birthday parties and anniversaries and that kind of thing, but I knew I had a skill set to offer corporates and NGOs in the way they've been running their workshops and their events. And that's what I started building into an idea, and we had conversations with Yvonne about it, and you keep testing the product. And actually, when I looked back, I had already been offering event services, but I had never thought of doing it monetizing it as a business and looking at it as a business. And that conversation did come from, as it were, a conference where we were together. Yeah.
Looking forward, if you had one wish for the way in which women entrepreneurs are received into the industry or in the industries in which they operate, what would you wish for? What would you want to change?
The narrative
Don't worry,
around,
we've got time. So
the narrative around women has to be changed by the women themselves. It's an interesting thing. It's not really, I don't think it's about the men. It's the women. We as women ourselves need to embrace our innate nurturing component of what makes us a woman. We're the ones who bring life, right? And as a result of bringing life, the way we look at things we're wired differently from men. And I think we need to embrace that as women. And as we begin to embrace that, the nurturing and the caring part of our personality in a powerful way, and not in a way that brings other people down, I think we can succeed. Not everybody can be aggressive, and not everybody wants to be. Not all women want to be aggressive. I don't want to be the woman who screams and shouts and is always complaining and carrying placards. I knew that was never my personality. But in a quiet way, we can make change. One of the women that I admire so much is Wangari Maathai, and we had seen Wangari Maathai on television growing up as this vibrant, almost fire-breathed kind of personality. But when I met her, she had such a quietness around her that I just loved. And I'm like, you mean you can be both? You don't have to pick one or the other, And I loved that. She was so quiet, she was so calm, she didn't want chaos around her. And it really resonated with me. And I met her when I was really young. So I knew that somehow in that quietness, there's something that made her so passionate enough to go and confront the powers that were there. And yes, that's the part that we saw on television. But I'm so glad that I met this quietness and this strength in quietness. And that's one of the things that I would love women to embrace. Let's become 100% women before we go out there fighting, and it'll come naturally. There's something that I was watching very recently about a famous American female lawyer, on TV, and she's really a firebrand in herself. But when people spoke to her, the people who were interested and her clients were interviewed, they would say that they loved that she was loving and she was caring and she was soft, but that part of her was never seen outwardly. So, and I believe that's why she's successful, because she's still a woman. Yeah, but she knows what to bring forward, when to bring forward her strength. Yeah, yeah.
And which strength?
And which strength? And which strength? Yeah, and which strength?
Wow.
Yeah.
What's next for Patricia?
A movie. A featuring. You know. You know what I would love? For me, what is big is just seeing this movement, and I call it a movement. I don't have many converts right now. But this movement of women supporting women and lifting each other up. I believe, I know people say women were their own worst enemy. I don't believe that. That's not my truth. It's not my truth. And I don't want to call it my truth because I have experienced a lot of support from women. Yeah. So I don't want that. I'm not going to embrace that as my truth. So I'm saying this movement of women supporting women, I want more people to buy into it because I know there's such strength in numbers. And I want to be able to see later in my life and look back and say, that's where we started from. That's where this whole culture that we're now teaching our children and our daughters. I remember when we started that journey. And for me, that's the big thing. That's what's really, really, really driving me. To see this movement of female entrepreneurs supporting each other take off. Yeah, that's the big thing.
I'd love to watch this show and to speak to Patricia again in 5 years when the not few, about 70 every single time she calls up for a meeting. So I'm not so sure what she calls not very many. But when it grows to 700 and 7,000 and maybe 70,000 and 7 million women in all spheres who, as entrepreneurs, are coming together and changing the landscape for themselves and for the entire society. Because it makes no sense that 51% of the population would not have a say and would not be recognized in the same way as the other 49% of the population is. But you see, it takes one woman and one book. Which book? You haven't told us about the title of the book.
So yes, the book that I co-wrote with my sister-in-law, J.C. Nyala, is a candid handbook for women doing business in Kenya. And that's where the stories, the 18 women who we've interviewed and their stories, and the how-to guide for female entrepreneurs to run successful businesses. Yeah.
Those are the kind of conversations that we have on MAKENA. Phenomenal stories of women in STEM, in service, in business, in education, in the arts. Make sure that you click on the link below and follow, subscribe on YouTube so that you can catch Patricia's conversation with me and all of the others that we've had. As always, thank you so much to Ole Sereni for hosting us at this beautiful venue. And thank you for watching. My name is Renee Ngamau, and this is MAKENA.